Thanks very much for joining us at Global Ideas Forum 2017, Mr. Kirby. Welcome.
Thank you.
First of all, I guess it would be great to know a little bit about what you're speaking about today.
Basically, global ideas include climate change, obviously a very important global idea, the Sustainable Development Goals and access to healthcare, and LGBTIQ rights, which are not just a problem in Australia, but they're a big issue around the world. So there are three big global ideas with which I've been associated, and I'll be speaking about the second and third.
In light of everything that's happening in Australian politics at the moment, it's a very interesting situation we have with the postal vote and the High Court ruling recently. What are your thoughts on everything that's happening here?
On everything? Well,
yeah.
I agree with a comment of a popular singer. It's an insult. It's a serious insult to gay Australians, and people just have to understand that, and they have to understand the health consequences of it, because there's so much evidence, first of all, of the impact on young gay people, that they feel isolated, humiliated, not accepted. They've been singled out for this postal survey. We've never done it before, ever, in the history of the Commonwealth of Australia. It's unscientific, it's not going to be determinative, and it's an insult to gay Australians. But because it has been imposed, we have to try to get people of goodwill to understand both its justice implications and also its health implications, and that means voting yes in the postal survey, and that's what I'll be speaking about. And the High Court ruling recently, I mean, was overwhelmingly in favour of going ahead with the postal vote. How did that happen? I don't know much about particularly what was brought to the High Court and what happened there. It wasn't overwhelming, it was unanimous. It was 7-0 in the High Court, and you don't get more overwhelming than the whole court. There were two issues. One was whether or not the postal survey was constitutionally valid, that is to say whether an appropriation had been made by Parliament to permit the spending of taxpayers' money on the survey. The claimants argued that it was not. However, the government, despite the refusal of Parliament to go ahead with the survey or a postal plebiscite, pointed to a provision for exceptional and unexpected expenditures, and that was considered sufficient in the view of the High Court. There are authorities on both sides in the High Court. During my time, there was a case called Combe, which was a case concerning electoral advertising by the Howard government to support the work choices legislation. The High Court on that occasion divided. Justice McHugh and I dissented in the case, believing that the spending of taxpayers' money should be made very clear. And that, I think, was the argument that was advanced, but it wasn't accepted, and so constitutionally it was accepted. There was also a statutory argument relating to whether the Australian Bureau of Statistics had the power to perform the survey, and that argument was also rejected.
There was a report that came out recently in particular about transgender Australians and young transgender Australians, and that the incidence of suicide in the transgender community is very high. What can we do about that? What can sort of everyday Australians do to try and make a difference in statistics like that when we're quite shocked by them?
Well, thank you for asking what we can do. That's something which Australians, and particularly young Australians, should ask, and I believe are asking. It's not only in Australia, of course. President Trump attempted to exclude all transgender people from the armed forces of the United States until it was pointed out that there were thousands of them, and that at the moment that would not be a good thing. And so that has been held up for the time being. But there's a lot of prejudice against trans people, including, I should say, also in the gay and lesbian communities. People don't really have much contact with or knowledge of many transgender people, and therefore that is very damaging, and it can lead to prejudice and discrimination, which sadly is very common, both for transgender Australians and also for LGBTIQ Australians. It's necessary to understand the commonality of our species, the normality of variations in our species on issues of sexual orientation and gender diversity, and the health implications of being nasty to people on the basis that they don't choose and can't change. It's just really, it's immoral, and really it's wicked. But it's also very damaging to the mental and physical health of the people concerned. So that's why, if we're talking about global ideas, we shouldn't just be looking at our Australian situation, we should also be looking at the world, because if it's bad in Australia, it certainly is much worse in many other countries, and our duty as good citizens of the world is to contribute to greater understanding, including greater understanding of the health consequences of discriminating against people, humiliating them and isolating them.
It has been quite encouraging in the past few weeks to see how businesses have really stepped up and shown their support for voting yes in the postal vote, and seeing that kind of movement that they're making. Do you think, I guess, business has a role in standing up against stigma and discrimination, but also some of the ideas we're talking about when it comes to climate change and health and how these all link together?
Business does have an interest, and the interest is not purely benevolent. It's in the interests of business. The interest of business is making profits, and making profits for the shareholders, and making good use of the workforce. And there's a lot of evidence that if you discriminate against people at work, then you are not going to get the most out of them. They're going to bring half of their personality and enthusiasm to work. So the bottom line is that it's in the interest of business to be inclusive and not to discriminate. And I think that was a point that Alan Joyce made recently about his statements as the General Manager of Qantas, because he would simply be reflecting what his duty as a General Manager is, to ensure that the employees of Qantas, like the employees of other businesses, are bringing their whole self and not leaving their pronouns at home. So this is one of the reasons, and I'm a patron of Pride in Diversity, which is an Australian organisation that supports business engagement and equality for all people, including LGBTIQ employees. And this is a very big issue, and I go to Japan next week because they don't have this in Japan, and there's quite a lot of discrimination and bullying in many Asian countries, but they're looking to Australia for how they can build up a Pride in Diversity organisation there, with the use of the multinational corporations which have done this in the United Kingdom, Australia and other countries, and now hopefully we'll be doing it in Asian countries and in our region. If
there's one thing that the people here, that our delegates could do tomorrow when they go home, when they wake up and they're still thinking about all of these issues, one thing they could do, what do you think that would be?
Well, there are of course a lot of things they can do, but one thing is to remember that we in Australia are part of the international community. There's a bit of a tendency in Australia to be pretty self-satisfied. We're down here at the end of the world, we're a long way, or so we think, from others, but in the world of the internet and of nuclear weapons and global missiles, we're not a long way from others, and our duty as of Australians is to reach out to others and help them to see the issues which are global issues and which concern us all as a species. Otherwise, the long-term history of the human species may be limited. And the other thing they can do is vote yes in the coming postal survey. It's completely unsatisfactory and it's a big insult to gay people, but it has to be got through, and it would be a dreadful thing in Australia if the organised churches and other opponents won the day. And I hope people, young people, intelligent people will not only vote yes themselves, but will seek to persuade their families and others to vote for equality and justice and ordinary human kindness. That's a message I would like to leave.
Thanks for joining us at Global Ideas Forum 2017.
I love global ideas.
Thank you.